Hello Internet, welcome back to Trumps of Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you about books, movies, music I find interesting, enjoy, or a combination of the two. This is going to be a pretty short one about this book I read very recently, Blue Skies by T C Boyle. T C Boyle is a satirical novelist from America. I've read two of his books before, Riven Rock, which I really thought was fantastic. I read around 2002, I guess. A few years later, I read his book, The Inner Circle. The Inner Circle was a book about the sex researcher Kinsey and the people around him. That book had the feel of somebody who's researched their subject so much that they've come to dislike them intensely. So I found its treatment of Kinsey to be unpleasant, and it kind of put me off TC Boyle until this book was recommended to me and I read it recently. I'll try to describe this book with as few spoilers as possible. It's a novel about a family, a mother who is influenced by her son to begin to try to eat food made from insects. This is because her son, an entomologist who studies bugs, has convinced her that food will soon be so scarce and that farming is not sustainable in the world that is now coming. So she starts to make food out of bugs, crickets, mealworms, grasshoppers, and serve them to her friends in Florida where she is retired. This sets the tone for a novel that is about humans trying to relate to the natural world, but in the way that we constantly objectify it or use it in a way that is egocentric or anthropocentric. She has quite idealistic ideas about this, but she also just gets a kick out of serving insects to her bougie friends when they come to dinner. Her son Cooper, who's a researcher, has a real firebrand attitude to climate change, to the environment, but when he becomes the victim of a climate related disaster, has real issues adjusting and becomes quite a bitter individual. His story was actually perhaps my favourite in the novel. I think the story that takes the most space in the book and that is maybe the most memorable is the story of Ottilia's daughter, Kat. Kat is a young woman who has moved into a beachside house with her frattish bro of a boyfriend who is a Bacardi ambassador. The two of them drink a lot, but he's away a lot doing events, doing promotions, and he leaves her alone at home. She's bored, so she decides to buy a python. No sooner has she bought a python than she loses the python, so she buys another python. And this gives you a sense of her attitude towards this animal. She doesn't seem to realize that she's bought a python that grows to be absolutely enormous. And when her brother Cooper discovers what he's done, he becomes extremely angry with her. He says that these snakes regularly escape and that they eat all the wildlife in the area. Kat is a very flawed individual, like most of the people in the book, but she's sort of sweet in a way. She doesn't seem to realize that she's an alcoholic, and her connection to this snake is basically that it's something that she can use to get followers on Instagram. She'll pose with it. Also, something that maybe will get her boyfriend to notice her a little more. And it also brings her into contact with some of the local people, some of whom have snakes, or the guy who sells snakes locally. So this is all the setup for the book, and as I said, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, so I won't go into detail into how the stories develop and how they fit together. But what I will say about this book is that it stages how the climate changes in water levels, in insect behavior, in disease behavior, in the seasons, the behavior of animals, all of these things are happening around us with increasing intensity, escalating every year, every season. And this family become a microcosm of how this affects society, how this affects people, and how this will affect us. The book seems to be just a little bit ahead of us in years. Maybe it's 2, 3 years ahead. So the flooding is slightly worse, the fires are more intense. And what I think is clever about T C Boyle writing this almost family comedy or family saga about these different related people over some years is that you sort of expect things to work out, things to go back to normal. That is how a comedy novel normally functions. But this book never really gives you that sense of things going back to normal, because things are never going back to normal. And in that way, this is maybe the most realistic, but also the most quietly unsettling novel about climate change that I've read so far. So if you're interested in a well-written, amusing, entertaining, very well executed, a little bit traditional novel that is exploring issues of environment, exploring our relationship to nature, to animals, then I think that you would probably enjoy this book. If you've read it, let me know what you think of it. And I think that's what I have to say about it for now. So I hope you thought this video was at least a little interesting, and maybe I'll see you again.